It's We'll See About That with World Series MVP Ron Cey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We'll See About That. Ron Cey here with Mike Gary. And Mike, we had a big weekend of college football, professional football, getting ready for the playoffs in the NFL. Sorry to say that my Huskies went down to Michigan. I could sit here and analyze it for you, but it's not going to change the outcome. I'll be brief with it. Congratulations to the University of Michigan. You are college football's new national champion. And as we look at what is happening in the world of professional football and also college football, we had three iconic coaches resign: Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, and Pete Carroll.
Yeah, we did. The news about Belichick broke earlier this week. That he and Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, decided to mutually part ways, which is usually an euphemism where he got fired. And, of course, Pete Carroll is going to stay with the organization as an advisory role. And Nick Saban, one of the greatest college footballs of all time, what's going to see what happens with him?
Well, that's true, and it's like how do you replace these guys? Who's next in line? What are the expectations? I hear that Deion Sanders has already made a call out to the University of Alabama and all the players who want to get into the portal transfer. So good luck with that. On the professional level, we have a very interesting game this weekend with the Rams for our local fans. The Detroit Lions, the team that we received Matthew Stafford from and traded Jeff Goff to, are now meeting in Detroit. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. It might be the best game on the slate, but Detroit is a 3-point favorite at this point in time. And, of course, the next biggest game, at least the way I see it, is Miami and Kansas City. Both those teams had higher expectations coming in and ended up being 3-6. So that's going to be – I don't think they wanted to see each other this early in the playoffs.
I do not. I do think that Miami can steal this game. I think that watching these Chiefs games these past couple of weeks, they seem disjointed. Mahomes seems angry on the sidelines. And, of course, they have the albatross of Taylor Swift around their neck. So that's what I'm looking for.
We're not going to touch that one. It's supposed to be very cold, though, so I'm hoping that still we'll have a terrific game. And I'm getting very excited about our guest today, Brigadier General, retired Army Peter Zwack. And I'm looking forward to that coming up very soon. A lot of interesting things, very highly decorated person. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Very nicely done, Ron. All right, here we go for the General. Stand by. This is going to be 10 minutes, music in, music out. When you hear the music at the end, that means we're going to break. Bye, gentlemen.
They still call me the Penguin. And we have returned after the break. We have a very special guest in General Peter Zwack, and Peter will be receiving a beautiful free gift basket courtesy of our friends at Melissa's Produce. Melissa's is the proud sponsor, partner of We'll See About That. Please be sure to use my VIP code Ron Cey when checking out at melissas.com. I'm very privileged. I think we are very privileged to have a person who has served this country in an incredible way, highly decorated, highly educated. We have all kinds of kudos coming off the wall for this person. I do want to get to some of those, but I think our conversation has more than to do just talk about what he has done, but what he has seen in his experience. General Peter Zwack, thank you so much for joining us. We're privileged to have you.
Ron, a real privilege to be brought on your show and introduced to your listeners.
You know, you had a career. You're a master's degree in strategy intelligence, military intelligence, security studies from the Defense Intelligence College, another master's degree in national security policy studies from the U.S. Naval War College, highly decorated, Distinguished Medal of Honor, Legion of Merit, Chief Joint of Staff Officer of the Year. You speak 4 fluent languages. I have trouble enough with my own. How did this become, you spent 34 years in the service, and you are still lecturing all over the world. How did you make this, your life's passion?
Wow, that's quite a question. First of all, I was just exhausted listening to that.
I know,
run.
I feel the same way when I did to read it.
And but I want to tell you that I'm proud of my roots in the military. I came off the street in 1980 and became a private first class. Joined the Army for 3 years to get a commission, and screwed up and stayed for 34. So and that 34 has been a wild ride, punctuated with really, really good people throughout. Mostly good and great experiences, a few less than that, but that always is that way. I've been able to serve around the world in multiple roles representing our great country. And when you get out, Ron, out into the world, you realize how people look up to our country. And that's something we should never, ever, ever minimize. And I don't mean that only in a powerful way, but that matters, but also in trying to do the right thing. We must never lose our sight on that ball. Served in 4 combat divisions and Afghanistan. I was in South Korea. My last 2 years were in Moscow, Russia, and I have 10 years in and around Germany and the Balkans. So, and everywhere I've gone, I've served with great men and women, soldiers, military, civilians. And the other thing, Ron, that I emphasize when we talk about America and our riches and all of that, never forget one of the things that we have a wealth that people often overlook is we have in this world, as complicated as we have, real allies in the world where our competitors or potential foes have few. And we must never lose sight of that. Even as we go back and forth in issues and all that. We are in a complicated period, Ron. I know your listeners are paying attention. A lot to be anxious about. We've got to keep our eye on the ball. We've got to be consistent as a nation and as a people, and find ways to break down the polarization in our country that so worries me. So I'll stop on that. We can go any way you want.
Well, were you destined for OCS?
I signed up what they called an college option program, meaning you go in, I did basic training at Fort Dix, you do other training. If you get through all of that, then you will be accepted into OCS. Then you go to OCS. But there was no guarantee. Meaning if you didn't get through or screw up in the first phases, you are going to be, you're going to be a young enlisted man for your 3 years in the Army.
Well, it says here that you were inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015. I thought they only gave those kind of awards off in sports venues.
My TAC officers and friends at the time would just look at that and shake their head and said, "What?" We don't even know if he was going to make it this first lieutenant. So it's an adventure, and it has been all about trying to do the right thing. And believe me, I've made many errors, and trying to, and you keep your eye on the ball, take the hard jobs, fight for your credibility, fight for your integrity. You're the only one that can give that away, is yourself, and work well with your peers. Which is so important. And your peers, that means also your subordinates, not just your seniors. Because everybody,
Agreed.
if it's a good, healthy command climate, and I ended up commanding, if the command succeeds, everybody in it, then the boss succeeds, and that young private in the motor pool succeeds. So, but everybody's got to work at it together.
General, once again, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for your service. And you came to your time of service to the United States Army to, I think, a unique point in American history. It was just a couple years after Vietnam, and General Creighton Abrams famously said after Vietnam that he had to get that Army home to save it. What was the culture and climate like of the United States military when you joined and started first as a young enlisted man and then as an officer?
It's a great question. Yes, the Army was shaking off the trauma of Vietnam. I had going in two of the proudest, greatest Black men as drill sergeants in basic training, who were combat veterans. One had his finger blown off in the 173rd Airborne, and another one, Jesse Brown, had his shrapnel in his knee. But these were proud men that realized of all the problems and dissent and race issues and all that were coming out of that period. And their attitude was, not in my Army. I probably was massively overeducated to them. They made life hell on me, but in a way also adopted me. And the bottom line is, with all the things I've done, I would have followed those two proud men from underprivileged families into hell. And one of them, Sergeant Jesse Beasley, came to my retirement ceremony 8 years ago as my guest of honor in a crowd of multiple generals and senior civilians. He was the man. And I will always, always, always just revere those men that represented the best of America, who pulled themselves up through the system and were proud of their Army and proud of their country, and wouldn't tolerate a lot of the BS that was going on, if you will, at that time.
Well, I can tell you that I also served in the Army Reserves during the Vietnam War. I went to Fort Bliss, did my basic training, went to Fort Sam Houston, do my AIT. I was a medic. I'm glad that I had an opportunity to serve, but I did not miss the opportunity, did not miss the fact that I was able to not have to go to Vietnam like a lot of other young people that were there. And as it turns out, that was a war that I think we all agree was not one that we needed to participate in. However, we are going to be back with General Peter Zwack with our second segment of We'll See About That right after this message. Please stay with us.
Okay, we're going to move right along here to segment 3. This is going to be 12 minutes with a brief read at the top here. Here we go.
Hello, Ron Say. And we're back with We'll See About That. I have one website read. Thank you for supporting our show. Did you know that you can go to our website, theronsayshow.com, and see our lineup of future guests, listen to all our shows, and see our latest merch. Stay tuned as our new arrivals pop up this holiday season. General Zwack, we live in a very, very complicated world. We have conflicts going on all over the place, and the one that I wanted to address first is Russia and Ukraine. How would you characterize the current status of the Russian-Ukraine conflict? Briefly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I have a lot of time with Russia, especially. I first studied there in 1989, It was still the Soviets, and then was in many times in the 30 years up until I became our defense attaché in Moscow. And this is what I'm going to say. I have a lot of Russian friends, and I respect aspects of their culture and their people. But what they did, gentlemen, was beyond anything that was remotely was monstrous. That invasion of Ukraine, for whatever reason, that they spouted almost 2 years ago now, February 20, is was something in our greater, certainly Western civilization we hadn't seen since the Second World War. And while I have a pathos for cultural aspects of the Russians, I need to say that, I'm furious with them. And I'm implacably on the side of the Ukrainians as they fight for their survival, their freedom. They're not perfect, but they really, really are putting up a hell of a fight. And I think it's representational to the world. They're standing up to a bully. They're standing up to, frankly, a authoritarian dictatorship that has characteristics of the fascists before World War II. They have to be, and they're fighting them tooth and nail. And for us to waffle and go back and forth, do we support them? Do we hold them hostage with the wall? We're a great country, Ram, and we can do it all. But if we let Ukraine fade, and what I worry most about it, they're going to fight. They're fighting. I was just there half a year ago. They're all in. The society is all in, but they're being worn down. And they will fight as long, and they will. What I worry is all the bad news that's coming in, they start to lose that thing that is intangible, that you can't put a dollar sign on, a number on. If they start to lose hope that they're in this alone, or they've been kind of left behind a bit, I think that we will all in later this generation pay for it. This is where whatever we stand for as a Western civilization, this is the line, this is the stand. The Russians have invaded Eastern Europe, of which we have committed ourselves since the end of the Second World War to protect and defend. It's primarily democratic precepts. So the war is tough. It is as grisly. The Ukrainians in the first year were smart, they were nimble, they were agile, they counterpunched, and the Russians couldn't believe what was happening to them. But over this long grind, the Russians have improved. They're nowhere near as good as the Ukrainians, but in numbers and mass and weapons, and they have them a little bit back and forth in a bear hug, the Russian proverbial bear hug, along this long front, where they're now looking at each other eye to eye, firing rockets and drones, and the Ukrainians are probably, knocking the Russians off 2 or 3 to 1. But the flower of Ukrainian, youth and middle age are dying in large numbers.
Yes.
And the Russians too, except I'm less sympathetic because this is a Russian elective war. So I'm only just going to say, and I've been there, and it's expensive and it's ugly, and we've got other things. We've got our economy and all these things. But for God's sakes, this is not the time to
pull out,
lessen our support at this critical juncture.
Yeah. Have you, during your experience of being a Russian attaché, did you have dealings with Putin straight away?
I shook his hand at Stalingrad during the 70th anniversary in 10 years ago, in February of February of 13. I worked a lot with his staff. I mostly saw him in proximity, but I was working with General Gerasimov's staff, General Shoigu's, their staff, the Ministry of Defense, the General Staff, and that was and their subordinates, and they were my day-to-day interlocutors. Also, we had this great group of international attachés of our allies and friends that we stayed very, very close. We were all in Moscow during this pressure cooker during the first Russian invasion in 2014 when they illegally annexed Crimea and set the stage for this invasion 2 years ago now.
Do you think that 2014 annexation of Crimea by Russia that was condemned internationally, but nothing really became of it? Do you think that kind of gave Putin and Putin's allies the kind of onus that if he did it before and it worked, we can do it again and it worked?
It's a very astute question. I will ask, and I was in the embassy at the time, and we were agonizing what to do that's credible to shake the Russians' attention and get them to stop, or they're going to pay a penalty. The problem is, Mike, that there was no formal military treaty, and while we would do things and try to choke things off, nobody was going to go to war for Ukraine at that time. The treaty situation, we weren't ready. NATO certainly wasn't ready, and that's not what it was. And so we did everything we could to support that, short of that. Could there have been more done in retrospect? Yes, but considering the time, we were also, think about, we were dealing with a nation, a nuclear-tipped nation that at that time, that's one thing they really had a lot of, and we all thought that the Russian military, frankly, was better than they were at that time. So I can only tell you that the decision makers in the military and the state and the political side were agonizing, along with the Europeans, how to tether the Russians. Sanctions look to be the most likely thing, and condemnation and internationally. And we started to reinforce our allies, and we were working on training the Ukrainians, but nobody was ready, and nobody was in the stomach to go into a military confrontation with Russia at that time.
What do you think the Russians' long-term, short-term goals are?
Well, I think it's sort of like an accordion. One activity leads to another, like in dominoes. If you get success, success begets, I don't necessarily more success, but more ambition. If the Russians were to get a truce or ceasefire and stop and hold and absorb Ukrainian land that they've conquered since 2014, or certainly since 2022, then in their mind, well, we've kind of won. We've got a good chunk of Ukraine, and while there's rattling and screaming and cage shaking and sanctions, we're there. And what it sets the ground for is another war. And it would be almost inevitable, because you'd have the Ukrainians that were seething and the buildup, and the Russians didn't quite get all they wanted, and they're going to be building up in this pause, and then it goes into another very, very dangerous round. That's why, as long as the Ukrainians want to fight for their nation, they're the ones paying the butcher's bill. We and our allies, not we America alone, should support them. If the Ukrainians say no mas, we're ready to go to negotiation, then that's another story. But that's not in the Ukrainian narrative right now. So to give the Russians a ceasefire and a line, an armistice line, it really you're really dividing Eastern Europe. Russia has got a bigger foot in Eastern Europe, And now everybody's worried about Allied strength and weaknesses in the Baltic states and those other nations that border Russia, let alone elsewhere.
Well, I think the Ukrainian people, excuse me, have gotten a good leader in Zelensky. I think it's pretty easy for them to stand behind this guy because he has put himself out there on the front line, and he's made just about every effort to make his cases heard. He's come to the United States a number of times, and if I'm a Ukrainian fighting for my life, I would feel comfortable about having this person at the helm.
I think you're spot on. I think that he doesn't look it, but and nobody thought this guy in the first week of the invasion would decide to stay in Kyiv, the capital, basically looked Putin in the eyes and said, and then told us, don't send me an airplane, send me ammunition. We were urging him to get out. And he basically flipped off Putin, and the Russians stayed in there, and they won that war with that courage. And while he doesn't look it and all that, he's the most Churchillian figure that we've seen, I think, in a combination of courage and tenacity and just pride that we've seen in this post-war period.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We're going to be right back with General Peter Zwack right after this.
Very nicely done, gentlemen. Very nicely done. All right, so here we go. This is going to be number 4 of 5. This one's going to be 14 minutes in and out. Brief branded read at the top. Here we go. Correct. Okay, here we go.
The fans are rooting for the Dodgers of old L.A. We're rooting.
And welcome back. We'll see about that. Thank you so much for joining us. And this day in Dodger history, 1977, the Dodgers swapped first baseman and outfielder Bill Buckner and shortstop Ivan DeJesus to the Cubs for Rick Monday in a trade that benefits both teams in subsequent transactions with the Phillies and Red Sox, respectively. After their many productive seasons in Chicago, the team deals the players for Ryan Sandberg and Dennis Eckersley, each a future Hall of Famer.
And that turned out to be a pretty good deal for the 1984 Cubs as we roared to the Eastern Division title that year. Ended up losing the National League Championship playoffs. Dennis Eckersley, a major contributor. Ryan Sandberg was the National League MVP that year. And General, I understand you're a Cub fan, so you must remember 1984.
I remember Sandberg was remarkable. I believe was Bruce Sutter pitching at that time.
Yes, he was. Yes,
he was golden, and
yes.
And it was an exciting time, and it didn't quite get there. That took another decade or two.
Yes,
but it was a great run.
It was.
And I grew up with in Chicago with going to games with Ernie Banks and Ron Santo, who as
yes.
a fellow third baseman.
I certainly did.
Those are, in my mind, the golden years.
Yes, it was. I have a number of things I want to cover. I'm going to let you choose. I'm going to bring up the topic of which do you think is a greater threat to our security, Russia or China? I also want to bring up the conflict in Israel and your comments about that. And I do want to mention something that is on Netflix now, a show called Unknown. And there is a segment on there called the Killer Robots that has to do with AI and military weaponizing of the robots. Start where you want. It's all yours.
We'll start back. When I have not seen Unknown, and I need to, but I am watching AI, and when I see this, all our generation, I'm sorry, folks, but our generation 30 years ago remembered the Terminator and Terminator 2.
Yes.
And that was all about AI. And
yeah.
It was a scary movie then, probably and a cautionary tale for today. I'm worried. I'm worried because I want to believe, and Europe, and there have been conventions to pull together, the world to try to get a handle on AI. But how do you control AI, especially if you have nations that don't want to play, or worse, non-state actors? 21st era, century era specter type of thing with lots of money, and it's got AI and can do all kinds of scary and nasty things. So I think it's going to be a major problem. I think that the nations that would do us harm are not going to look to get them regulated. They're going to look at as AI as another alternative or asymmetric way, working cyber and all the different things to our weaknesses. And we've all been watching Chat GPT, and that's just the bottom end of it. So yes, I don't want to be alarmist, but when a lot of the top inventors are worried, and we look at human nature, and if you're out there, you have nations and people and non-state actors that look for advantage, and their motives aren't good, then AI is a perfect way to kind of split the seam and get things going. So that's my view on AI. We've got to do everything we can in the formal way, try to get a handle on it, like arms control. But sadly, I think it's going to be it's going to have to be much more than that. Russia and China. In the near term, I believe the bigger threat is Russia. Russia, nobody wants to go to war in a big way. Nobody wants to go to a nuclear war. And Russia certainly doesn't. China doesn't. But I worry in the Russian case in the near term that there is that we're bumping up against each other in a lot of places in the world. There's a lot of suppressed anger and passion over Ukraine. We have submarines up in the Arctic and in the Mediterranean and over in the Pacific. And I mean, there are all kinds of ways. I worry about an accident or an incident in the near term with Russia, which hopefully can be managed. China, I try not to get on an anti-Chinese bandwagon, but undeniably, China sees itself as a superior civilization in many ways. It is rapidly catching up or even moving into a leader basis in AI. It is set off to match us in nuclear weapons. And now when the Chinese have parity in nuclear weapons or feel that we can't take them down, then that gives them more freedom of action in their mind. You have also the Chinese, the economic, the whole aspect of Chinese businessmen and trade all over the world that, yes, good for business, but also laying in, if you will, tendrils and seeds for potential expansion. I worry about China long term. It has its contradictions as much as Russia does. Internally, it's got not a necessarily completely happy population, and a lot can happen that could maybe turn the ship. We've got to watch Taiwan. Friends, you got the presidential election in Taiwan this Saturday. And that's a big deal. If there's the Chinese get any scent that the Taiwanese are really looking to break away, and I think the Chinese understand the one China policy, the Taiwanese, but it makes everything tenser. By the way, friends, The fight that Ukraine is doing against Russia in Ukraine, their invasion, I believe has bought time for Taiwan. The Taiwanese have learned, they've seen what another underdog nation can do when motivated and believe in their nation and their passion and get support. The Chinese would have to cross 100 miles roughly to get there on an amphibious landing. It's possible, but it'd be really, really hard. And so there's no guarantee that the Chinese could take it or would take it. But in the long term, I worry about China for the very reasons that I've tried to discuss. In the short term, I worry about Russia just with I'm clenching my fists, the sheer anger and the sheer fury that Russia has to the West, and how they have been held at bay in Ukraine. If Russia gains or somehow were to whatever we define win is in Ukraine, I think it will actually open up more Pandora boxes than less. Long term, China has enormous capabilities. They're talented people. They're big. They are suffering from a major demographic challenge, as is in Russia. So they've got clay feet in some ways. And again, out in the countryside, the economy, it's not all happy. But last thing on China, Russia is one really incredible thing that's occurred in the last couple of years in our foreign policy, is we've seen now allies like Japan and South Korea pull together in the Pacific with Australia, with us, with the Brits, in a way that wouldn't have been seen possible even a few years ago. And that has gotten both the Chinese and Russian perspective. What was your last question?
Well, I wanted to also discuss North Korea and their ties to China and Iran and what's going on in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine. And
I'll be quick.
Yeah.
First of all, the whole vision in my mind of the powerful Putin basically going to Vladivostok to meet Kim Jong-un with his hands clasped, sort of like a supplicant, looking for missiles and things and weapons of the type of stuff that the Russians used to sell to North Korea, was really, really interesting. What we have seen is that, in my mind, we've seen the emergence of a new age axis in the world, like one emerged in the late 1930s with Nazi Germany, Japan, and Italy, and other countries, all strange bedfellows, but all autocratic, and for whatever reason, they pulled together. The Koreans, they've done it. And my son is a young captain on in the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea. I was just there 2 weeks ago. They're serious. That's a serious mission there. Yeah. That's now what over half a century. Now, last thing, Israel-Palestine. I struggle with this, Mike, Ron, because nothing can mitigate, nothing can excuse, nothing can minimize the horrors of what occurred on the 7th October to those kibbutzim and settlements along the Gaza border. Nothing. I mean, it was medieval in brutality. It was grotesque. And I am upset when you have a lot of entities downplaying that and overhyping the Israeli reaction. The Israelis are in a fight for their lives in their mind. It is existential. The Palestinians and the regional, a number of countries in the region, Iran and all of that, have basically said Israel has no right to survive and would try to take them off the planet if they could. Now, saying that, I do wish the Israelis, and I think that they are changing, but they need to find a way, and they have been working. It's been hard, especially, we've got to remember there are 120 hostages that Hamas is sitting on, And before you get too sympathetic to the Hamas and the hostages, they're to the Palestinians, they're sitting on hostages. And this is, the Israelis, these are Israeli, Israeli Jewish. And the Israelis are going to do all they can to get them out. And so it's a vicious, ugly thing that sadly has put Israel in the spotlight because they have gone in aggressively with a fury. Could you imagine if something like that happened to us? You remember 9/11, how we reacted? I don't want to, it doesn't, in my mind, justify what the horrors of 20,000 dead civilians, many kids, but it could explain it a little bit. And how we work that with the world to some type of settlement. I don't see these countries or these entities being able to create a two-state solution without an international protectorate, including the U.S. allies and UN, sitting in Gaza, because there's no reconciliation now, at least for a generation, between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Last point. And you
General,
have
let me hold you right there. We've got to take a break. We're going to bring you back for the last segment, and you can finish your thoughts then. Thank you so much. We'll be right back after this message.
Very nicely done. Yeah, amazing. Okay, we just got one left, and it's a very, very short one. So it's only about 3 minutes here, fellas. So so General, we're going to come back, and we're just going to finish up that point, please. We're going to say goodbye to you, and then we're going to wrap up the show.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. Fantastic interview. It's really, really insightful.
I'm sorry, you guys got me going.
No, we love it. We love it.
This is a treat for us to listen to your expertise.
This is great.
No question.
All right, stand by, fellas. Here we go.
Hey, Ron. How you doing?
Campy, just fine.
Okay, we are back, and we're going to let General Zwack finish off his final comments on this. Please take it away.
We were just talking about the Middle East and Gaza. We got to talk about Iran. And I'm not one that's thumping drums to go to war with Iran or anything like that, but clearly Iran is very much the spider in the center of the web, manipulating these militia groups, whether the Houthis, we all heard about they're firing their missiles and drones in the Red Sea area. They're in Yemen, and they are fanatically on anti-Israeli, and so they're doing that. Eventually, one of those missiles or drones are going to hit a ship and kill people. And if they kill American people, I'm absolutely convinced there will be a major reaction. That's one. You have also, you have the Iranians talking to Hamas. We see that in Beirut. In fact, one of the Hamas negotiators was killed by the Israelis just last week. You have this group called Hezbollah, southern Lebanon, and they are arguably even better equipped than Hamas, that have been already firing missiles and rockets into northern Israel. When does that pop? And that would stop if the Iranians told them stop. And a lot of this is Iran is I believe, pulling the accordion here, the strings, because if they wanted to make it stop or could make it stop, it will happen. And somewhere eventually there is going to be, I think, an eye-to-eye confrontation with Iran, and unless they get their proxies to stop. Now, by extension, if the Russians really hated what was going on, they could put a lot of pressure on their partner Iran to stop. That hasn't happened. And then China to a lesser extent as well. So it is volatile for a chapter 2 or chapter 3 in that region. Stay tuned.
Thank you so much, General Zwack. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Your expertise is incredible. Congratulations on a wonderful career, and good luck and success to you in the future.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'd love to, once you guys post it, just let me know where you posted it.
Absolutely.
know.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you so
service.
much.
All right, God bless you. Hope to have drinks with you one day.
Thank you so much. Okay, can we stop for a second? How much time do we have? None?
No, we can just do it. Hold on one second. General, thank you so much. That was just an honor and just a privilege of my career to have you on.
Fine. You guys are great. You take good care.
And thanks for being a Cub fan.
Oh, yes.
Go Cubbies.
Go Cubbies.
All right, thanks, General.
Take care, General.
All right.
Terrific.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All I need is just I
don't think we need to go to Jim Colonel, do we? Do we?
All we'll do is just be like, hey, thank you. All right, thanks. That's going to do it for this episode of We'll See About That. Come back next week for Jim Colonel, and we'll see you guys next week.
I didn't get a chance to do the book read nor the Instagram.
I'll put that in post.
Okay, great. So, wow. Can we start there? How much time? 30 seconds? Less?
Just
okay.
Just do the best you can.
Okay. Yeah.
For Kia, we're going to do this dry. I'll do all elements in post.
Wow, what an incredible pleasure to have the general on, and an incredible experience for me to listen to what he had to say. Please stay tuned with us for next week. We have Jim Colonel. We'll know more about him. He's a ex-professional player who has a lot to say about pitching. I got to stop.
Yeah, no worries.
You want me to stop? Where do you want me to start?
Just you don't even explain who he is. Just be like, next week it's Jim Colonel. Just be like, that was perfect. Be like, wow, that was amazing.
Should I start with that again?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that was such a great experience for me. I hope it was for you to learn more about his experience and what he had to say about the current circumstances in the world today. Okay, everyone, we got to wrap things up. Please join us next week. We have special guest Jim Colonel joining us. See you next week, and have a great weekend.
Perfect.